Sup guys, welcome to episode 3 of the Journey to GM series where I showcase 3 games that I've played recently in my journey to becoming a Grandmaster. This episode I have some bad news. Last episode we left off at 1350 ELO. As you can see, I'm now 1288 because I tilt queued. I got tilted and I kept playing and I kept losing, so I went all the way down. But I stopped getting tilted and I grinded all the way back up to back into 1300. But we're still not where we were. And here are 3 games I played when I was not tilted. So first game, d4, knight to f6, e3, g6, bishop c4, bishop g7, d5, which is a bad move because he moved a pawn twice in the opening, and usually moving the same piece twice in the opening is bad. And I play d6, c3, castles, the King's Indian bootleg variation, a3, knight to d2, he goes back to d3, which is a waste of development tempo. I play knight takes d5 because he's blocking in his queen from the defense of the d5 pawn. He plays bishop takes g6. Here I played h takes g6 because let's say f takes g6, queen comes in with check, and this is completely fine. But I preferred to have h takes g6 instead. Queen takes d5, knight to b6. The best move is actually c5, going for the outpost on b3, forking the rook, and having control on the dark squares, using the weak light squares, because his light squared bishop is no more. So I played b6, trying to gain tempo on the queen, but this is actually a waste of move, as you'll see later. So he goes back to d3. I play e6, developing the bishop to take control of the weak light squares here in his position. He plays knight to f3. Bishop c4, my goal here was to prevent him from castling. And I had a nice bishop outpost here as well. This also supports the knight coming to b3 sometime in the future. So yeah, this move stops castling. Queen to d2, which puts him in the line of fire of a fork, potentially. And it blocks in his dark squared bishop, which makes it dead. His knight is also dead as well. I play knight to d7, going to c5. He plays h4 here, unknowing that my goal is to jump in. He should have played something like b4 here, stopping my knight from going to c5. That would have been a good idea. But he didn't play it, so he plays h4, knight to c5, and he's completely lost here. He goes knight to d4, preventing my knight from jumping into b3. I play e5, trying to knock him away from d4. He plays b3 here. The best move here is actually a6, keeping control of the light squares in the position, but I play another move because I didn't see a6. I play e takes d4, b takes c4, and knight to b3, forking the queen and the rook, forcing myself to win the rook. So queen to b2, knight takes a1, queen takes a1, d takes e3, because I calculated bishop takes e3, and rook to e8 pins the bishop. So that was played. King to f1, unpinning the bishop. But I play queen to f6. The goal here is to take the bishop for free because his pawn cannot take back as the queen is pinning his pawn. Knight to d4, trying to attack the queen off of this and getting his bishop off the attack from the rook. But it doesn't work as I have queen to e6, attacking his weak c4 pawn, which he cannot defend except for going to knight to d2, and if he goes knight to d2, I kind of have a devastating attack here, where if the queen goes to knight to e2 check, I pick up his knight on d2. So bishop to e3. So I take on c4. King to g1, queen to e2. There was a better move here. I believe it was rook takes e3. But I played queen to e2 to prepare rook takes e3. Because I didn't like... Because if rook takes e3 in this position, so he played king to h2. Let's say he played a move like this. Rook takes, pawn takes, and queen takes with check. And it's completely winning here, because, say, engine says f1. You can kind of bring your rook to e8 and try to go for a checkmate, or attack the queen here at some point. The queen is pinned, and this is just losing for white because his king is way open, and his pieces are all separated and scattered here. So king to h2 was played. Instead of playing rook takes e3 here, pawn takes e3, and queen takes e3, or bishop to f5 check, I play rook to e4, trying to go for checkmate. He plays a4, missing that I was planning to take on h4. King to g3, and I have mate in 1 here. But I miscalculate mate here. And this king, for about like 10 moves, starts running across the board. So I messed up here. I played rook takes h1, pinning his rook to his queen. Bishop to d4, trying to trade off my dark squared bishop. I play e5 check to try to get the queen to check after bishop takes. So bishop takes e5, queen takes e5 check. f4 was played, and I play queen to e3 check. And here, I had mate in 3, right? But he starts running. His king starts running, and I keep missing the mates in 2s, the mates in 3s, and his king just runs over until I finally checkmate him on b6. So his king went from h2. Let's see if I could find it here. His king goes from h2 all the way to... His king goes from b2 all the way to a6 here and gets checkmated. So yeah, I need to brush up on my checkmate patterns and stuff, or something. I should have taken longer to calculate that, but yeah, that's game 1. Game 2 starts off with d4, d5, bishop to f4, e6, e3, bishop to d6. This is called the e6 London system e6 pawn to e6 variation. Knight to d6, and bishop to g3. He actually takes here, which is, I personally think, is not a good move if you're planning to castle kingside here. Goes knight to c6, and I try to catch him in a trap here by playing bishop to d3. The point of this move is if he castled, pawn takes, knight takes, queen goes to h5, and black is in trouble here. But he doesn't fall for it. He plays knight to c6. c4 is played. Bishop to d7. Knight to c3. And I realized that going for the trap here made me waste a bishop tempo, because if I just played e2 here, all the way back here, if I played e2, this would have been fine. And then I could go for c4, but if I was going to go d3 here, if I was going to go oh, not here, oof. If I was going to go d3 here, in this position, I should not play c4, I should play something like knight to c3 or c3. Because playing c4 here actually makes me lose a tempo when d takes c4. So bishop takes c4, knight to a5, attacking the bishop. Bishop goes back to d3, because this... okay, so with my bishop on c4, on this square, it's very bad. But the fact that he wastes the tempo to offside his knight to attack my bishop, I basically did not really lose a tempo here with my bishop. So this is actually a fine move for me. I still have pressure on the h7 pawn here. Queen to e7. Trying to castle queenside. I see that he goes for the queenside. So I go rook to c1, attacking his weak c7 pawn on the queenside here. And he plays bishop to c6, attacking my weak g2 pawn. I play knight to f3, h6. I play a3, attempting to trap his knight because he has nowhere to go. And he castles queenside, completely forgetting his knight was trapped, and he loses. I mean, he surrenders here. He resigns here. Surrendering is for Yu-Gi-Oh! Terms. But yeah, he resigns here. Third game, bonkers. I'm black here, and starts off with e4, c6, knight to f3, d5, e takes d5, c takes d5, d4. Some sort of exchange variation of the Caro-Kann at c6, knight to c3. Usually you play, I believe, bishop to d3 here, but he plays knight to c3, bishop to f5, taking control of the light squares, a3 for some reason. I don't know why. I play e6, just opening up my bishop, and supporting the d5 pawn. Bishop to b5, pinning my knight, which is usually met by rook to c8 here, putting pressure here. If the bishop ever takes, you take with the rook and put pressure on the c2 pawn. Knight to e5, putting double pressure, which is usually what I like to call a newbie move, because this is a move they always do in the exchange variation of the Caro-Kann. Knight to d6, just developing because the rook's protecting, the pawn's protecting. No real threats here. Developing the bishop, and he plays f4 here, which is it's a weakening move, very risky, but it keeps the knight here on this outpost, pressuring c6, and h5 is played to prevent g4 from happening because I want my bishop here. Bishop to e3, killing his dark squared bishop even more because his bishop is looking at nothing here. Knight to e7. The goal of this move is to potentially put my bishop on h7 at some point and go knight to f5 to attack this bishop and this pawn here twice, potentially. And queen to d2 is played, a6, booting out the bishop potentially, forcing him to trade. Bishop takes. I play pawn takes because I wanted to bring my bishop to h7 and bring my knight to f5 at some point, booting off this dead bishop. But the engine actually prefers knight to c6, putting pressure on the outpost knight here, which I can see later on in the game it might be a little better, but I preferred b takes c6 here. h3. The goal of h3 is, well, I thought the goal of h3 was if bishop to h7, he can play g4, and if pawn takes, this is being pinned, and I cannot go to f5, but h7 is actually a decent move here. g4 is not a good move, apparently. The engine doesn't recommend it. But yeah, h7 worked here, but I thought it didn't work because of the move g4 in this game. But h3 is played, queen to c7, preparing c5 to open up the position and put more pressure on the c2 pawn. b4 is played, a5, breaking up this pawn, this a3, a4 pawn chain going on here, so I could push c5. Let's say if takes, c5 can be played, or queen takes, pinning the queen to the king. And yeah, so knight to a4 is played, and a takes b4, and c5 is still prevented, so I go rook to a8, just in case his knight moves, I can just take 2 free rooks. So rook to a8. He plays castles, and I'm forced to castle here because otherwise, let's say I play something like g6, he can move his knight, and oh shoot, if rook takes a1, rook takes a1, and he's threatening some scary stuff here, so castles is forced. But if I just castle right away, basically this isn't a threat, or c5 isn't a threat. And this pawn isn't really being attacked easily because I got g3 if I can, or g6 to play. So knight to c5, blocking the c5 pawn from ever being pushed. And having a nice knight outpost here. And I calculated that at some point he might go d7. So I wanted to have my rook on d8, preventing any future d7 possibilities after I kick out his bishop on the outpost on f6. So rook takes a1 is played, rook takes a1, and rook to d8 is played. And he plays c3, which is actually I thought was a bad move because it makes my light squared bishop stronger. It actually opens it up a little more. f6 is played, booting out the knight, and just like I expected, I don't think people in my elo knows that sacrificing a rook for 2 knights is actually a good move. So rook to d7 was played. I actually thought he might go here, which is the best move. Knight 5 to d3, I think it's called. No, knight e to d3. Okay, knight e to d3. I thought he would go here. Best move. But he actually went to a spot I didn't really think he would go to because I could just sack my rook for 2 knights. And now I'm more active here. I got the bishop pair and his rook isn't really threatening anything. So queen to e2. The goal here is to attack the h5 pawn. I go bishop to g6, hoping to put my knight on f5 now. He goes g4, stopping any hopes of that. And I calculated here that I could actually threaten checkmate here if he takes the pawn. So I was debating h takes, or I was debating bishop to e4. I play bishop to e4 because let's say he goes to g5, I can play something like e5 here, attacking the h3 pawn. And if he were to take, I could potentially get my bishop more active here. All these pieces are staring at the weak king side, and I'm just winning here. And he plays, actually, he plays g takes h5 here, which is another move. And here, I play e5, opening up my queen, attacking the h3 pawn. He plays rook to a8 check, and I go to h7 because I calculated that if the I went rook to 8 check, I go to king to h7 because I calculated that if king went to f7, in the future he might have some annoying pins along the 7th rank here. And it also kind of stops my knight from really doing much, or my queen. So I go king to h7, queen to h2 defending the h3 pawn. I play e takes f4, bishop takes f4, bishop takes f4, queen takes f4, queen takes h3. Now I'm having checkmate threats here, potentially. And it goes queen to h2, threatening queen trade. I go queen to c3, taking the pawn, threatening d4 check. Queen takes d4 check. So he goes to queen to f2, defending. And instead of playing something like queen takes b4, I just bring my knight in to help support the checkmate because his king is wide open and he's pretty much weak here. And his rook is like 2 tempi away from helping, or 1 tempi, as rook to a2 is the best move here. He goes a7 instead, which I thought this move was completely terrible because it doesn't help his situation at all. He just pins the pawn to my king. And this is where he gets checkmated. Queen to c1 check, queen to f1 blocking, queen to g5 check, and king to f2, and queen to e3 checkmate. I did this all under 1 minute, by the way. I've been about 1 or 2 minutes while my enemy had 10 for like most of this match, kinda. So I'm really impressed on this match here. So yeah, that's episode 3. If you liked it, please like, comment, and subscribe. And have a nice day. Peace out.